Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for taking the time to come and be here for our August 3rd Board of Education meeting. Glad that you are here, and do know that with the weather the way it is, we are working to attempt to minimize the technological difficulties we may have, but we will just keep going unless there is some kind of outage there. But we will go ahead and get started with a quorum. And so I will take attendance if you'll let us know that you're here. Miss Allred?
Here.
Mr. Rivers?
Here.
Dr. McKnight?
Here.
Mr. Peace?
Here.
Mr. Udy?
Present.
Dr. Houlihan?
Present.
All right. Dr. McLean?
Here.
Dr. Myrick?
Present.
Dr. Winborn?
Present.
Miss Day?
Here.
Attorney Dubison?
Here.
Okay. And Board Clerk Lynn Henderson?
I'm here.
Okay. All right. Well, we have a quorum. That is all of our board members present. And so we will begin with the invocation. Dr. Houlihan, would you offer our invocation tonight, please?
Yes. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the many blessings you have bestowed on all of us. Thank you for allowing us as elected servants to make the best decisions possible for the children in our school system. These are difficult times and difficult decisions we have made and likely will be making in the future. So please guide us in all we do. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Houlihan. Mr. Rivers, if you offer our Pledge of Allegiance.
I will. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. All right, board members, first up is our approval of minutes. We have minutes from, let me see if I can get these in order. April 27th Board of Education meeting, May 4th board meeting, June 29th board meeting, and July 2nd board meeting. And so when the board is ready, what is your pleasure?
I'll make a motion to support the minutes as presented.
Okay, do we have a second to approve the minutes as presented?
Second, Peace.
All right, we have a motion by Dr. Houlihan and a second by Mr. Peace. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, if you're ready to vote, we'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
And Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, that motion carries unanimously. We will next, Madam Superintendent, do we have any changes or adjustments to the meeting?
No, sir. None at this time.
All right, thank you,
Mr.
ma'am.
Richardson, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I would like to suggest an addition to the agenda.
Okay.
You and I have emailed back and forth regarding this, and I do respect the concerns that you mentioned. I agree with them. I would not be asking for this agenda addition if I did not believe this was absolutely essential for the very existence of traditional public schools in the future. And that is, I'm going to be asking for an addition to the agenda to allow us to look once again at opening our schools under Plan B as recommended by the governor and the Department of Health and Human Services. At stake is, and more importantly than the existence of our school system, is the welfare of our students. Since our July 23rd meeting, much more information has been revealed by the CDC on July 24th, by the congressional hearings of the CDC director last week, by the American Academy of Pediatricians, and by a panel of eminent frontline COVID physicians, all urging that schools open. it was revealed that in the entire world, and most of the world's schools are open now, in the entire world with tens, if not hundreds of millions of data points, not a single case has been reported of a student infecting a teacher with COVID. Not one single case. I therefore ask that based on this new information and based on the peril that we are placing our children with increased rates of suicide, mental illness, not being able to screen students for domestic abuse and neglect, for all the reasons that the CDC and the governor is concerned about our children not being in the classroom, I ask that we add to the agenda a further look at opening under Plan B, as this board approved unanimously on July 2nd.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rivers. So before we can revise the agenda, the board must approve that revision. And so do I have a second? Are you making that in the form of a motion, Mr. Rivers?
Yes, sir. I move that we add an agenda item to relook at opening our schools under Plan B.
All right, thank you, sir. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to add the discussion of revising our reentry posture to Plan B. And is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I want to mention something. I mean, part of it concerns me that we're just hearing this now. It's August the 3rd. The kids will be back here in what, 2 weeks? And there's a lot of work that would have to go into it if we changed it. I just, how can we be prepared to talk about this when I mean, Rod, you threw out some good stuff, and I'm certainly not arguing with you about it. But I haven't seen that stuff. I don't. How do we make a change, a decision when this has just been thrown up to us, and we don't have any data that we can look at?
May I answer that, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Rivers.
Okay, the things are changing very rapidly. A lot of this information came out last week. We met July 23rd, and what I don't understand, and maybe Ms. Dubison can clarify this, we unanimously passed as a board a resolution, a motion to open under Plan B on July 2nd. So we got to get that figured out. But basically, Dr. Houlihan, we had our meeting on the 23rd. The CDC released their recommendations on the 24th. The CDC director was then interviewed by Congress last week. At the same time, a panel of physicians who are frontline COVID treaters came out with a very strong statement urging opening our schools. This all happened in the last few days, the last less than a week. I emailed Dr. McLean and Mr. Richardson last week and asked this agenda item be placed on the agenda. So things are happening very fast. And I understand Mr. Richardson's reluctance. And I understand that going back and forth is unsettling. I think that was Mr. Richardson's word, but this is so critical. The information that we're getting on a daily basis is that it is not unsafe to open our schools, but if we do not open our schools, we are placing our children at increased peril, and it's just, it is just not right. We need to do a better job of informing our staff, our teachers, our school staff, of the science, of the actual data. The news media is not the place to go. And I don't care whether you go to Fox News or CNBC or MSNBC or CNN, they're not giving us the information we need. You have to go to the state departments of health and go on their websites and get the data. I'll give you one example. I've been in touch with a hospital administrator in Houston, whom I know very well. And he has done a lot of research for me. In the healthcare industry, where the healthcare workers are working in COVID wards and working at hospitals that treat COVID patients 24/7, they are not in COVID. They're doing contact cleaning with chemicals like Oxivir, and they're wearing masks, and they're using common sense and washing their hands. All the protocols that we have established and been mandated to open our schools under Plan B. we can minimize the risk. If healthcare professionals who are working with COVID patients, actively sick COVID patients, changing bedpans, changing linens, changing their hospital gowns, starting IVs, if they are not getting COVID, then we can protect our teachers. We can provide transportation. We just need to enlist our parents. We did that. My wife and I, we set up after-school clubs at West Oxford. We had 90% participation. Every single child got a ride home from a carpool, a relative, or a parent or a grandparent. We can enlist our parents. This is a time of crisis, and as a nation, we always pull together in these times. Dr. Julian, I'd like to just continue real quickly. You sent us a very poignant article from the Washington Post about a small district in Arizona that lost a very beloved teacher. I read that article many times because it really moved me. But when you read it a second and third time, what you realize is they assumed that the teacher got COVID teaching remotely with 2 other colleagues in a large room with all the proper precautions. It was never mentioned that that teacher could have gotten infected somewhere else. And that's going to happen. Other members of that teacher's family passed away very tragically, indicating to me that the infection likely came from outside of that school classroom. Our teachers, all of us, we have to go to Food Line. We have to go to Walmart. They are not doing temperature screenings. They are not doing contact cleaning. They are not insisting if you don't feel well, you don't come in there. In actuality, the safest place, I believe, for a teacher to be is in our schools at this time. And I feel so strongly about that. I'm 68 years old, and with Dr. McLean's coordination and coordination with principals, on the day we open our schools, I will be there. I will do temperature screenings. I will do the most risky thing that any teacher believes. I will change classes during transitions. I will pass out supplies to students. I will do anything that's necessary to prove to the teachers that we can do this safely. And I'm older than the vast majority of our teachers. There's so much data I could give you. For instance, in 2020, 7 people in the 0 to 24 age group died from flu in North Carolina. Since January, 7 flu deaths in that age group. 0 COVID deaths in the 0 to 24 age group. 0 in the state of North Carolina as of July 28. In Granville County, we have 140 active cases out of a population of 60,000. We have one of the lowest rates of COVID in the entire state. Everything points, if you look at the data scientifically, everything points that it is far more dangerous to our students to keep them isolated and not let our teachers look at them and be with them.
Mr. Rivers, I hate to stop you, but I feel like we have moved into debating the actual issue that you're asking to put on the agenda. So I feel like at this point, we need to finish up this conversation about this so that we can either vote to put it on the agenda or not, instead of discussing the science behind what you're actually asking us to vote on.
I understand, Mr. Chair, but if we don't get the vote to even discuss it in the meeting, we're done for. So I appreciate that, and I'll yield my time.
I would like to respond to the comment that was made that I declined to put this on the agenda. I will take responsibility for that in 2 areas. First, it was not within the time frame that we typically ask for agenda items to be put on. Second, as a duty to our educators who are now hurriedly putting together their stuff to get ready for the new school year, I felt it incumbent that we make sure that we give them as much time as possible. And so that is my reasoning on why I did not bring this back to the board for an agenda item at this point. So at this point, is there any further deliberation about whether to add this to the agenda?
I call the question.
All right. So we will do a roll call vote. The motion on the floor by Mr. Rivers and a second by Ms. Allred is to add this to the agenda of tonight. And so we'll go around the table. Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes?
Dr. McKnight?
No.
Mr. Peace?
No.
Mr. Udy?
No.
Dr. Houlihan,
No.
and I vote no, so that is 5-2. This will not be on the agenda tonight. Thank you, Mr. Rivers, for bringing that up.
Thank you for allowing me to, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. All right, board members, we'll now move to our fourth section of the agenda, consent items. You see there on your board packet that you have the pay scales for the 2021 year. You have the board-appointed school treasurer and bank depositories that come before you every year. You also have student fees that come before you every year. At this time, I would entertain a motion as what the board would like to do with these consent items.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
There were, the last I checked, a couple of schools that didn't have deposits first. I don't
Yes,
see
sir.
it on the list. Did they all get, Northern Granville Middle got a vacant, and was another one, I think.
Dr. McLean, can you speak to that, or Ms. Day?
Miss Day, please.
Yes, as far as the school treasurer, we do currently have a vacancy at Northern Granville Middle School, and that is the only school currently with a vacancy in bookkeeper position. I know they're working to hire that position, to make a recommendation and hire that position.
So, as far as you're concerned, we'll get filled by school openings?
Yes, they're working. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Day. All right, board members, do I have a motion for the consent items?
Motion to approve.
All right, do we have a second?
A second on one.
I'm sorry, Mr. Udy.
I'm not sure. Is this a first read or second?
These are not policies. These are just where we have to appoint a school treasurer, or each of these items are action items, but not policy.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion by Mr. Peace and a second by Mr. Udy. Do I have any further discussion on the consent items? All right, we'll go around the table. Ms. Allred,
Yes.
Mr. Rivers,
Yes.
Dr. McKnight,
Yes.
Mr. Peace,
Yes.
Mr. Udy,
Yes.
and Dr. Houlihan.
Yes.
All right, that motion carries unanimously for those consent items. Thank you for the staff that put that together. Next, we will have our public comment period. Dr. Winborn, if you would take care of that for us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, tonight we have 4 individuals who have signed up for public comment. And I will read their comments that were submitted. 3 of the 4 submitted their comments via the submission form that we advertised with the notice for the meeting. We had 1 member who was unable to submit using that form due to technical difficulties, and they submitted theirs via email this afternoon. So I'm going to be reading that one first. And that was on behalf of Danielle Hayes, again, submitted by email, no address provided. And it begins, you should be open 5 days a week. There is no executive order prohibiting schools from opening 5 days a week or children being able to return to the classroom. If a family chooses for the betterment of their own lives and has the ability and desire to keep their children home on a homeschool or virtual learning plan, then that is their prerogative. If a teacher chooses to not return to the classroom, whether it be for health reasons or because it is simply too late in the summer for them to be able to figure out how to teach in person instead of remote, that is their responsibility. And I fully expect them to deal with the consequences of their actions and decisions, just the same as any other essential worker who has decided not to return to work in a will to work state. Do not tell me that the powers that be have tied the hands of the local districts. How have some put in the hard work and done what's best for their students and staff by figuring out how to open up their school buildings? For local districts to mandate families figure it out is beyond words, especially considering they have no problem dipping into their own base funds for other non-essential services. If they have received funds from the CARES Act, was that not intended to be used to help negate the costs of bringing students back to the classroom? Why are they squandering millions in funds to buy a Chromebook for every kindergartner, provide millions of meals for districts that serve thousands, paying college-educated staff to provide daycare for teachers, buy hundreds of hotspots, and hiring counselors to treat the socio-emotional fallout from months of isolation in children? Wouldn't it make more sense to put all of that money and effort to getting kids back into the classrooms? Who is guaranteeing internet access for every student? Who is guaranteeing participation from every student? Who is guaranteeing support for every student with special needs? IEP, ESL, AIG, OT, speech therapy, etc. Who will ensure that every student has the opportunity to master the standards needed to continue building upon the foundations of their education? Simple, no one. If students cannot be physically accounted for in a school building, there is absolutely zero way that these needs can be guaranteed. The free and adequate access to education for every student is the responsibility of our government, guaranteed to us by Article 9, Section 2 of the North Carolina State Constitution. No executive order nor bill passed by the General Assembly shall ever negate our basic freedoms granted to us in the North Carolina Bill of Rights. Classroom budgets are already always being cut. Supplies are always low. Teachers are underpaid and undervalued. If you want public education to be privatized, great. Keep sitting back and being okay with these decisions, because that is exactly where this is headed. And that concludes the statement submitted by Danielle Hayes. Number 2 on our public comment list is from Margaret Hall of Creedmoor, North Carolina. And she writes, although we were pleased with the switch to virtual learning for my Hawley student, my Wilton third grader can't use a mouse or type efficiently to finish the work submitted for her. Work without grading or consequence for the time invested. Their attention waned, their enthusiasm for learning evaporated, and their eyesight suffered. No new concepts were introduced, taught, or tested. By April, my middle schoolers' Zoom meetings went from holding more than 100 students to less than a dozen. This version of school is not effective education. It's been nearly 5 months since students have had accountability, support, and sustenance from programs already paid for by taxpayers. I'm now having to consider quitting my job and purchasing curriculum to supplement the learning of my children. It's clear that there are dwindling chances of students attending school this year with a teacher unless they can afford a private school or hired tutor. The inequity of the virtual learning option cannot be ignored. I do not envy your difficult decisions during this time. However, if there are families who want their kids to attend in person and teachers able and willing to teach them, it should happen as soon as possible. Until it does, the Board of Education is not providing an education to children regardless of their socioeconomic status or at-home support. Sincerely, Margaret Hall. Our third comment tonight is from Hannah Altieri of 5110 Lucy Averett Road. Ms. Altieri writes, Dear Granville County School Board members, during these trying times, I can appreciate the tough position you are in. Over the last few months, I have spoken to pediatric mental health professionals, fellow educators, and nurses. While managing social distancing and mask wearing in our schools may prove challenging, I feel an urgency to plead with you to reopen our schools. The mental health toll on our community's children alone should be enough to persuade more discussion on this topic. In addition, children who need EC services are falling behind. Many of the families in our community also comprise of parents who need to work and will not be able to do so with the continuation of school closures. This puts more strain on families already struggling financially. Lastly, after speaking to many parents, while some had positive experiences with distant learning, many did not. From only one Zoom class a week to redundant worksheets to no communication from teachers, many did not receive adequate learning opportunities. Thank you for your time and thoughtful consideration, as always. And that concludes Mrs. Altieri's comments. Finally, the fourth comment tonight is from Andrea Stein of 1078 Timberwood Drive. Ms. Stein writes, please explain why the families that want their students in school full-time or at all are unable to be, and that the decisions to not reopen schools were based on what stay-at-home families wanted. Why couldn't we have both online for those who wanted it and in-school face-to-face for those who do not? That concludes public comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Wimborne. Thank you, public, for those comments. Next on our agenda is our report from the superintendent. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. And good evening, Mr. Chair, our board members, colleagues, guests, and friends. I too would like to thank our public for the comments. We take all of those seriously. Today's meeting is special in that it kicks off our 2021 academic school year. While there's still many challenges ahead and many viewpoints for us to consider, that is exactly what we plan to do. Take everything into consideration. It is also important for all of us to remain and to get excited about starting a new academic year, albeit extremely different from our previous years. We have seniors preparing for their senior portraits. Yes, we're going to try to keep a sense of normalcy in a variety of ways. Although different from many of us, we have kindergartners who will be experiencing school for the very first time, and their teachers are ready for them. Sixth graders will be experiencing middle school for the first time, and ninth graders are getting ready for high school, in addition to many other firsts. I'm excited because we have a district full of choice options and firsts that will still need to happen, although they will happen differently this time. The options for families where one size does not have to fit all is definitely what is occurring in Granville County Public Schools. Our schools are full of choice options for our families and are still available by request. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic that is still taking its toll, our board allows families the opportunity to enroll their children in one of three options in the virtual academy, which is still being available. It is still being made available at each school, at our Granville Academy School, and the blended face-to-face virtual model that will begin in a remote fashion at the beginning of the year, whereby all of us hope at some point will move to either Plan B or Plan A when safe to do so. Granville County Public Schools is all about flexibility this year and will continue to keep safety as a top priority in all we do. I would like to remind everyone that this spring, we unveiled and initiated an online registration process that has been going quite well for some time now. So no one has to visit a school nor a registration center in order to register their child for school. Families may register right online and may find the registration link on the front page of our website. Trust me, our goal is to attempt to serve you well. Now, despite the many challenges and viewpoints that confront our traditional pictures of school that have caused us to reimage and redesign what normal typically looks like this year, I encourage all of us to stay focused and know we are truly all in this together. So please take confidence in knowing that our leadership, administrators, and staff are hard at work preparing for the school year. Principals and district staff have already been through quality professional development hosted by the health department, and our custodians continue receiving safety and protocol training to ensure our buildings are safe. Our nurses are working hard with school leaders and staff on properly using thermometers and identifying appropriate areas on campus and developing proper protocols in preparation for receiving staff and then our students whenever the time comes. Please know we have all rolled up our sleeves to do whatever might be necessary to ensure a safe, productive academic year. It will look quite different from the spring, and I, along with our board liaisons, are also continuing conversations with our county officials concerning our need for increased internet access throughout our community. We are willing to partner any way possible to make certain our students and families have what they need. We can't do it alone though, so partnership is key. Mentioning the start to the year, please allow me to remind everyone that this evening we will walk you through some additional tenets of what Plan C will look like. We will begin the year in a remote instructional delivery model of service to students that will be assessed every 4 weeks with decisions communicated to the public from that reassessment. There are no plans to make immediate shifts at week 4. It will be a reassessment at this point with information to follow, and we will be careful to make sure we communicate well with everyone and to allow time for pivoting. The decision that will be made will be done in partnership with the health department and will utilize both qualitative and quantitative data from sources internal and external to our district. It is important to mention that whenever it is safe to return, a staggered entry approach will be used for a period of time to help acclimate students and staff to the new and different way of life in school. All information concerning procedures, protocols, and processes can be found in the toolkits from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. These are also available on our website for your convenience. Finally, this evening, board members, please join me in welcoming our new hires and our new families who are joining our district. We are delighted to have each of them and look forward to serving them well. As I bring my remarks to a close, I hope everyone looks to this new year knowing that our goal is to return students to school when it is safe to do so. Until then, we are going to do all we can to take good care of our students as best we can in these unprecedented times. What I know is that together we truly can get through this and we can do this. For our parents listening, Please remain on the lookout for information about how your child's school plans to open this year, about your child's teachers, and more. Welcome everyone to the 2021 school year. Mr. Chair, this concludes my remarks this evening.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. Next is the portion of our board agenda for board member reports. I will go first with the chair report. Good evening. It's hard to believe that we are at the beginning of a new school year. It hardly feels like we've even finished last year. However, our administrators, teachers, classified employees, and even our children have been eagerly anticipating decisions that will determine how the new school year will look, and all of them have begun making adjustments as we move forward in what each of us will be a year for us to remember for a long time. That being said, we are still about educating children and expecting excellence and achievement for all as we begin this new year. All of decisions made around this virtual boardroom, as well as decisions at the school level, should be made with the thought of what is best for children at the forefront. As we start this first board meeting of the new school year, I wanted to lay out a few priorities for us to focus on as a board. In August, we will meet in a retreat to discuss financial priorities and how they impact other areas of curriculum and instruction, as well as operations. Later in the month, as our educators have done all summer, we as a board will take part in professional development exercises with Dr. Pat Ashley. As we examine our roles as board members, how we work together to support the work of our superintendent and other educators of the district, and formulate a plan on how best to move forward this school year. In September, we will be supporting the work of opening school, reassessing our reentry plans dealing with COVID, and work to interview and choose the best candidate to fill the soon-to-be vacated seat for District 3. In October, we will resume our focus on efficiencies within the district and how it relates to our building and other resources. And as we move into November, we will hopefully be in the place where we will vote to fill Mr. Rivers' District 3 seat. In December, we will be welcoming new board members who will represent Districts 1, 3, and 6. As we install these board members, we will hopefully formalize and move on forward with our board procedure work that we began earlier this year. This past week, Mr. Udy, myself, and the executive team had the opportunity to meet with our county commissioners' liaisons. During the meeting, we presented our reentry plans as well as interim budget decisions we have made dealing with fund balance. I had the opportunity to press on the issue of internet infrastructure that is at the forefront of some of the technological needs that we have as a district. Currently, at this time, the county is exploring their options in this area of the work. We will continue to need to lobby and support the idea that this has got to be a priority for Granville County. We are already, I would dare say, in my opinion, 3 to 4 years behind in this undertaking. So we will need to make sure it is at the top of our list of asks over the next year for the good of our county. All of this has to do with the work of the board. Most importantly, we as a board need to be focused on the academic, social, emotional, mental, and otherwise health of our students while supporting the work of some of the best educators in the state that choose to call Granville County their place to change the world through educating children. I want to thank each of you for the time and effort you put into your service and remind you, we are to be about children and their success. So I appreciate the opportunity to serve you as your chair this year, and I look forward to the work that we have in front of us. I'd like to ask now if any of our committees have reports, academic, financial, or operations. All right. And do our board members have any reports?
Mr. Chair, I have a report.
Yes, sir.
From District 3, I've received numerous phone calls and emails from concerned parents about our not opening our schools with face-to-face instruction. We've already talked about this earlier in the meeting, but I think it's important to understand that I am concerned that we do not have an attitude on the board or in our administration, which I would call a yes, we can attitude towards opening our schools. It appears to me it's more no, we can't. When we talk about what's best for the children, what we are doing, in my opinion, and this is my opinion alone, and I hope and pray I'm wrong, but in my opinion, what we're doing is the worst for the children. Dr. Houlihan brought up a very good point earlier when I asked to add an agenda item. Why haven't we gotten the science? Why hasn't the staff sent out to us, the board, all the reports that I've seen by combing the state departments of public health websites, by talking to hospital administrators? I've done all of this. I've got reams of data. Why didn't our administration provide that to us? Instead, we got a survey showing that our teachers, many of whom were reluctant to report to work. The science and the data irrefutably and overwhelmingly indicate that we can safely open our schools. Why haven't we seen that data? CDC, the governor, North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, American Academy of Pediatrics, panels of physicians have all stated that the danger to our children is far greater from not opening our schools than it is from COVID. And the data I shared earlier shows that there is no increased risk for our teachers and staff. If there's any data that refutes that, I would love to see it. I cannot find it. I think the most important thing to consider is that healthcare professionals who work with COVID patients on a daily basis are not getting infected. This is nationwide. If you use contact cleaning, not deep cleaning, but contact cleaning frequently, if you use masks, if you practice the protocols that we have established, it is my, not just opinion, is my fervent belief that we can do this safely. On July the 2nd, this board voted unanimously to open under Plan B, the very plan the governor recommended. And I don't know what happened between July 2nd and July 23rd, but we started getting more and more information from the staff that teachers were reluctant to come to work and that it was unsafe, and that is patently untrue. What I would like to ask tonight, and I recognize that I am a real thorn in the side of a lot of you, but I've got 2 more months. But what I would like to ask tonight is, let us commit ourselves to reading the science, to researching the data, and to committing ourselves to opening our schools as soon as possible, to using the protocols we need to use, to enlisting our parents to help with transportation issues, to do whatever it takes. Every day that our children are not in the classroom is another day that those children fall further behind. And I'm here to tell you, if you think you can take Calculus AB and do it 1 hour a day online and be completely competent in that subject and be ready for Calculus BC in January, I disagree. These classes, these courses, especially in high school, are going to take far more than 1 hour per day or 4 hours per day for 4 classes. It's not going to work, in my opinion, and I hope I am wrong. So the message I would like to leave with all of you is, let's rededicate ourselves and commit ourselves, not in 4 weeks, to looking at this and making, deciding and maybe not. Let's look at, as soon as we can, opening our schools. Let's get the data we need to prove to ourselves and to our teachers that it is safe to do this. I appreciate your consideration and your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivers. Board members, any other further reports? All right, we will now move to our policy section. And our first item is the book bus of 2020. Dr. McLean.
Wonderful. Our book bus went out in the community to try to keep literacy alive this summer. This time, I'm going to turn it over to, let's see, who's driving? Are you driving, Dr. Winborn?
I certainly can. Yes, ma'am, I will.
They've put together a few little pieces of their work this summer. Let's take a look at what the Book Bus did this summer in our community.
It's taking just a minute to download. Ms. Piper, I believe, is called in and is on the line. Is that correct, Dr. Meyer?
Wonderful.
That's correct. She and Ms. Daisy Roberts will be taking the lead on this presentation.
Excellent. Lauren Piper and Daisy Roberts took the lead with the Book Bus this summer. Let me give them about a minute or two to share with you. Lauren, Daisy. I don't know, Miss Piper, Miss Roberts.
Ms. Roberts, you are muted.
I think I just got unmuted. Okay. Ms. Piper asked me to.
I am here.
Oh, yay.
I'm sorry. Yes, Daisy was here as my backup. I do have connectivity issues where I live, and I am going to do the best, but Daisy's helping me out in case I get disconnected. Good evening. I am Lauren Piper, District Literacy Facilitator, and I had the privilege of coordinating the Book Bus efforts this summer and seeing those efforts through alongside our wonderful lead Book Bus operator, Daisy Roberts, and our other wonderful operator and bus driver, Kathy Carroll. The Book Bus began visiting sites on June 30th and ended today, although it was cut a little short by thunderstorm. As just with about everything, the Book Bus had to look different in 2020. All the procedures had to change, and there was a great deal of preparation and daily tasks needed to ensure the health and safety of everyone involved. In terms of preparation, all books were placed in Ziploc bags and snacks were packed in paper bags with a delightful note. Each day, our wonderful bus driver dodged road construction as we traveled to our scheduled sites. And once the day was over, it was back to county office to pack more snacks and books and sanitize the totes and other materials that were touched. Although the students were not allowed to come onto the bus this year or have a volunteer sit and read with them, they still had the option of selecting a book from the provided categories and to choose a snack bag based on a picture of its content. We wanted it to have some element of choice since we know how student choice influences the desire to read. One very important change made to the Book Bus this year was that all books were kept by children, no returns. We were very excited about that. We love the idea of children building their home library through this initiative. So here on the picture you'll see, on Tuesdays we visited Broughton Terrace and Maple Ridge. Here at Broughton Terrace, we gave 130 books. And as you can see in the picture, social distancing happened with the use of green cones for kids to stand at, and then 6 feet apart, the volunteer was standing at another cone and gathering basic information such as age, grade level, school, and then provided book choices. And once that, they could go to the line once they had their hand sanitizer and temperature check. And then after they chose their book, they got to go to the middle line, which is where they made their snack choice. We refined this process in the first few days and felt like it was successful. Our volunteers here were Vicki Hines, Tondra Loftus, and Jenna Holloway. Next slide, please. At Maple Ridge, which was our second site, which is coming next, we gave out 96 books here, and our volunteers were Bethany Bonamere, Vicki Woodliff, Anthony Herndon, and Amy Rice. Next slide. On Wednesdays, we visited Christian Faith Center and First Baptist Church of Creedmoor. At Christian Faith Center, we gave out 202 books to a lot of eager children. Some couldn't wait to get back inside the building or car to begin reading their book, as you can see by that bottom left picture. Next slide. At First Baptist Church of Creedmoor, we gave out 257 books. This is the site that we saw the most of our community members. Many families were served here through our drive-up option, where they remained in their vehicle and a volunteer came to the car to gather information and then returned with the book and snack choices. Our volunteers here were Shannon Norton, Paige Page, and Ashley Clark. Next slide, please. On Thursday, we visited the villas at Knox Grove in Oxford and Butner STEM Elementary. At Knox Grove, we gave out 135 books. Our volunteers were Tria White and Nancy Russell. Next slide. At Butnerstem Elementary School, we gave out 212 books. We also had quite a few community members at this site. Our volunteers were Deanna Blair, Tony Bullock, and Laura Haycraft. So we're going to stop here for just a minute. Next slide, please. Before we reveal a grand total, Daisy's going to give us that. We have a few quick special stories. We had a lot of regular visitors to the book bus. In the bottom right corner, you'll see the Coleman family that came every week. Some of the siblings were having trouble getting up in time to make it to the book bus. So the older sister, who was only just going to middle school, marked it on her calendar and set an alarm so she could remember and make it in time, the whole family. The mom of the two little boys and little girl on the left told us that they look forward to this trip each week. And one mom, who has 4 boys between the ages of 2 and 8, in the middle picture at the top, came out every week, and that was a task to get all 4 of them in and out of the car each week, but they were so excited to come. The little girl in the middle loved coming to the book bus so much. That's her. There's the same girl in all 3 of those pictures because she had either her mom or her sister bring her to at least one site on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and sometimes all 3 days. So she racked up on the books. My last special story actually happened on the first day of the book bus. The girl in the first picture was excited to get the book Old Yeller. She told us that she had started reading it in the media center at her school, but had to put it back. And due to the school closure, she wasn't able to finish it. Her eyes just lit up when we told her that not only could she finish it now, but she could keep it. It was a special moment and one that we will not soon forget. So, Daisy, will you do the honors now of revealing our total numbers for the book bus?
Yes, of course. We are so glad that we were able to help these children build their home libraries and continue reading during the summer, because we know that a book is a gift that you can open again and again. Over this summer, we gave away 1,032 books.
Thank you, Daisy. Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Will you go to the next slide, Dr. Winborn? Our goal was to make it past 1,000, so we did it. Special thanks. I took the time to say the names of all of our volunteers because they were just so vital to this being a successful initiative. We could not have done it without them, especially this year with all the extra precautions. I wanted them to know how much they are appreciated. So thank you, volunteers. Thank you to Michelle Robinson for gifting us these cooling towels that we are modeling in these pictures here. Most days are extremely hot and humid, especially with masks and gloves, and the cooling towels were a big relief. I want to say thank you to First Baptist Church of Creedmoor for the lovely book donation given to the book bus that was a part of their Angel Tree efforts this past holiday season. And those books were placed in Ziploc bags and added to our inventory, and they were very popular books, so we didn't hang on to them long at all. Thank you to Mr. Richardson for visiting our site and to Dr. Houlihan for allowing us to put him to work on his visit. He was in charge of the snack choices and did a fabulous job. Pictures of him in action aren't shown on this presentation, but an iMovie presentation of our book bus adventures is in the works, and those pictures will definitely be shared. Thank you, Dr. McLean, for your unwavering vision with this book bus initiative, and thank you to Dr. Winborn for all of your help with communication assistance, thinking through the logistics, and helping acquiring the equipment needed. And finally, we know how important literacy is, and our goal has always been to ignite and sustain the love of reading. This year, more than ever, we feel that Granville County Public Schools has made a positive impact on our community, and we are grateful to have had this opportunity to be a part of this initiative. That's it for me. Thank you for your time and attention.
Ladies, we'd like to thank you all for your leadership with literacy in Granville County Public Schools. You were incredible all summer. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to add my thanks as well. This is one of my favorite initiatives we do, so I'm very excited to see what we were able to accomplish this year, even with all of the parameters we had to stay within. So thank you again, ladies, and to the team that put that together. All right, next is our 8.02, our reentry update. And if I am correct, Dr. McLean, at the end of this, we have an action item, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right, well, we'll let you start off.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chair. Tonight's reentry update is designed to show how we have reimaged and reimagined some of the district-wide work. Yes, there are some components we've had to reimage, and the work will be done differently every day. Some of you've mentioned this already this evening. You're right, every day pieces are different. We get new bits of information. The research is different every day. The last time we talked, we brought in the medical expert from right here in Granville County, but tonight it is more about Granville County Public Schools. We will cover several areas. We will show you our reopening plan. In fact, we are unveiling it with you tonight, so you will get to see that. You will look at some additional components to the parent guide. You will see some pieces under instruction and operations, some of our new health and safety screening components, and pieces from our human resources department. Assisting me this evening with the pieces will be Dr. Stan Winborn, but at this time I turn it over to our lead reentry person. We're so pleased with her work on this project. Lauren Curtis, I turn it over to you at this time, and at the end of the presentation, we will turn it over to Attorney Dubison because she will need to walk you through why we need action tonight. Again, another piece that has come down we need to share with our board. So at this time, Lauren, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. Thank you, board members. This evening, we're going to share just a few highlights from our reopening plan. We published a parent version of this last week. Next slide, please, Dr. Winborn. But we just want to highlight a few things for you this evening. We've created this reopening plan and we've created two versions. The first version is a version for staff. And let me just say, Dr. McLean thanked me for my work, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it around and thank a group of about 60 people working on 16 different subcommittees that have been working on this since before school got out at the end of the year, looking at the guidance from NCDPI, looking at the requirements from DHHS, and creating scenarios for what every little bit of our school day and school efforts might look like in both Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. It's an overwhelming amount of work that they've done and just done a fantastic job. And that's what we have to share with our staffs as we move into our reopening of schools in the coming weeks. Just fantastic work. And we want it to be kind of like the guidebook. It is standardized procedures for every aspect of what we do on our school campuses. So everybody's on the same page and we're all moving forward together. Now we know, as Dr. McLean said, things are changing constantly. So this document is constantly under revision and we are working to ensure that we continue to be in compliance with the requirements from the state so that we can keep our students and staff safe and also ensure that they are getting the supports they need both academically and socially and emotionally. We've published a parent version of this document that is available on our district website. Dr. Winborn, if you want to click on that really quickly. We will continue to update this as well. I expect we'll have a new update out later this week that will continue to share with parents more information about what's happening, but you can see just some of the things that are available to our parents inside that document. We've got information on our 3 learning options, updates on technology, transportation, meal service, student and employee health and safety, and social and emotional well-being. We're going to continue to work and update our families. If you've received questions, board members, please send those to me. We want to be sure that we're addressing those questions in this document so that everyone has access to that information. Thank you, Dr. Winborn. You can go to the next slide. Just to highlight again for you, and some of this we've talked about a little bit already this evening, the things we are seeking to improve upon now that we are in planned remote instruction instead of emergency remote instruction like we were in the spring. So just some things that have changed, and we want to remind folks of we sought your feedback this spring. We want to make sure that we are doing what we need to meet our students' needs. So this fall, we have found the money through CARES Act to provide Chromebooks for all students. We know that's a need in our community instead of just grades 4 through 5. Last year, the guidance from DPI was to focus our instruction on review. This fall, we are focusing instead on new learning while also looking to fill some gaps if our students have them. We are allocating a lot more required time for teaching and learning because we know that our kids need this in order to be successful. Again, in the spring, the guidance from the State Board of Education was that we were not to give grades, that we were not to take attendance, but this fall we are grading work. We are giving feedback to students based on how they're doing on their assignments. We are giving credits in high school. Attendance is going to be taken daily in elementary school and by period in middle and high school. So we expect students to be participating every day. And if they're not, we're going to be reaching out. And then finally, we know that while we were providing supports for students and families during the springtime, sometimes folks didn't know where to access the information they needed or who to speak to get what they needed. And we want to be sure that we're providing structured supports in those areas of technology, academics, and social emotional learning. So we've got some plans in place to make sure that folks have the things they need to help their child be successful. Next slide, please. Last week, we met with the county commissioners and discussed internet accessibility in our community, and we wanted to give you an update and share what we shared with them. So again, we are going to continue to have Wi-Fi access available on all our school campuses. We're expanding that so it's accessible in the larger parts of the parking lot instead of right up next to the building. We're going to continue to deploy our Wi-Fi rangers on buses. We found some areas this spring where they were very successful and some areas where they were not as successful. So we're looking at redeploying those to different areas of the county to see if we can reach the families that need it. In addition, we've been able to secure funding for 250 ish MiFi devices, and we'll be putting out an application to families soon to determine how to best distribute those and best meet the needs of the most students in our community. We're also looking forward to sending out some information about how we'll be partnering with public libraries soon in our community to provide some increased internet access. And we're working on and hope to announce soon some partnerships with some of our local businesses in terms of sharing some internet access as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, you asked us to consider, and we want to know that we listen and we hear you. And so we do have an update. I believe Dr. McKnight, you asked last time, could we consider allowing students to transition at some point? And so the executive team met and has determined that we will allow students or families that have chosen full virtual or face-to-face to switch at the semester if they so choose. It is important to note this does not apply to Granville Academy. That is a year-long commitment like all of our schools of choice, but this does apply to our students that are doing virtual or blended learning at their base school. Next slide. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Winborn.
Thank you, Ms. Curtis. So just a couple of updates about some of our operations. First, regarding personal protective equipment. One of the recent updates that's come out from the governor is that face masks will in fact be required for everyone in our buildings all the time. This includes students, staff, any sort of limited visitors that we have coming to the building. But there was some conversation early on about elementary age children not having to wear masks, but this in fact has been changed. Everyone will be required to wear a face mask at all times while on our property. There are a few exceptions, of course, when students or staff are eating or drinking, or maybe when they're doing some sort of strenuous physical exertion, they would be allowed to take the mask off. Also, there are some allowances for individuals who may have physical or developmental disorders or exceptions. And we'll have a process in place for folks to identify and perhaps come up with some sort of alternate use for a face shield or something of that nature. Next, of course, is social distancing. DPI and DHHS have since removed the percentage of capacity capacity that are limited within each of our schools. So the only stipulation now is that social distancing be observed at all times. This is a requirement when on our school property. It applies to all students, all staff, and visitors. And the only exceptions to this would be members of the same household, such as siblings or other relatives that attend school, would be able to sit near each other, for example, like on the same seat on a school bus, or if you had staff who were trained that were attending to or screening children. Those would be the only exceptions for the 6-foot social distancing rule. As far as screening goes, that will be also required for all students, staff, and visitors. And this will occur every single time someone enters our property. We had our liaison meeting with the county commissioners at the central office. It was an in-person meeting. I think there were 9 people in attendance, so we did not have a gathering of more than 10. But we, in fact, underwent the screening protocols, and it includes a skin temperature check on the face or forehead, neck area to see if someone may have a fever. The skin temperature can be an indication for a symptom of a fever, and anyone with a temperature of 100.4 or higher would be flagged as having a potential fever. Part of the screening process also includes asking folks a series of questions about their recent symptoms and their health status. This information will be recorded in a confidential database at each of our sites. And the reason we will be doing that is to, if we do have a situation where there might be an incidence of COVID, we can provide that information to the health department and they can use that for contact tracing if needed.
Dr. Wimmer, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Did I hear you correctly, and maybe I misunderstood, that the governor has relaxed the requirement, the 50% requirement? Did you say that was no longer in effect?
Yes, sir.
So would that mean that if we go face-to-face, we're essentially plan A? Is that what that means?
Well, essentially, it means we would be limited by the spaces within the building itself. As long as we honor the social distancing requirement, then that would drive the capacity. No longer would you have a numerical percentage that you had to go by. Most of our classrooms typically can only hold somewhere between 10 and maybe 13 or 14 kids while keeping them 6 feet apart. And that's while they're stationary within a room. We have some classrooms in some of our older buildings that are even smaller, and keeping at a 6-foot spacing might even have as few as like 8 or 9 students per classroom would be the maximum that would be allowed. So I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
No, I appreciate that. We were, and I have not seen it, if it was disseminated, I've not seen it, but the parents by July, I believe it was 28th, were supposed to make the decision for options A, B, and C. Do we have enough parents who opted for C for remote learning that we would naturally fall into compliance with this for the most part? Has that been looked at, or are those results tabulated yet where we can know what the survey showed from the parents or the choices they made under the SAFE program?
Well, Ms. Curtis has all of that data by school. I will say that when you look at the data overall, we do have somewhere a little less than half of our parents are selecting a virtual option, but that's not necessarily, it doesn't bear out that way in every school building. Some school buildings have a much higher percentage of folks who would like to physically report to school. So it makes it difficult. We might have some schools where we wouldn't have enough space to accommodate everyone at a single time.
Right. Will you be sharing that information with the board soon?
That SAFE data, I guess, from the SAFE parent sign up sheet, the sign up for fall entry, it's essentially a survey That just closed this past week. And I know Ms. Curtis has been working with the principals to also follow up with the families that did not respond. And so I believe that that information is available. I'm not sure of the timeline about sharing it with the board. Obviously, it's something we're working on, in real time to get everything planned for the start of school in just a week and a half.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the board would be interested in seeing that when it's convenient, as soon as you can.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. So I think I covered screening. I'll just mention a few things about human resources. We've been developing some documents to help our staff in understanding the expectations about returning to work this fall. The vast majority of our employees, of course, are 10-month staff, and they will be reporting to work on the 10th of August, except for those at early college who have already reported back to work. But Mr. Perry and our HR team have been working very hard to get timely information out to our people so that they know what the expectations are. We are going to have a staggered entry of staff back to school. The first 2 weeks, staff will be coming in cohorts, A and B cohorts. They, of course, will be required to follow all of the the procedures that I just went through regarding masks, social distancing, and screening, and so forth. But after that first 2 weeks, the plan is then to have everyone reporting back to work. That would be the third and fourth week of school, so that all of our employees are physically reporting back to work. We worked really hard to develop that plan. We benchmarked with a lot of other districts from across the state, and we received guidance from our health department, as well as Dr. McLean drew on her principal advisory group and others to put all that together. We also are providing information to our staff about the various leave options that are available. It is important to note that the emergency sick leave that was made available to our employees in the spring is currently no longer available. So right now, it's the federal Families First Coronavirus Relief Act leave that provides essentially up to 80 hours of sick leave for anyone who has COVID or is caring for a family member who has COVID. It also has a provision for family medical leave of up to 10 weeks at 2/3 pay for anyone experiencing issues with COVID or childcare issues. But that is only at 2/3 pay. We also have a workplace modification request form for employees who self-identify as high risk. And that's a process by which we seek to provide alternate work duties or work locations for our staff if they are available and if they qualify as high risk. And we use the guidelines provided by the CDC in determining the definition for high risk. And then, of course, this document also has a ton of information about what to do in the event of employees who may be exposed to COVID, contracted or quarantined, and so on and so forth. As you can imagine, there is a lot to this, and we were trying to spell it out as much as possible in a series of FAQs. And then within that document, there are links to other resources such as charts and diagrams and things like that to help our staff navigate this. Next, just to talk a little bit about child nutrition, we still absolutely plan to feed our children under Plan C. I'm really proud of our child nutrition department. They have done an amazing job this past spring and this summer to provide meals to our families during this difficult time. We know that there are a lot of people that are out of work, that are struggling, that they relied on our schools to receive free or reduced meals. And so we want to continue that to help provide relief to them. The way we plan on doing this is to operate each of our each of our child nutrition cafeterias at each of our schools, and we'll have curbside pickup at each of our sites. And then we're going to have some select drive-up locations like we did last spring in some of our remote areas. And then we also plan on delivery of meals to our medically fragile students. We understand that a lot of parents that are caring for these children, it's very difficult for them to leave their home to get the children into a vehicle and come out and get the meals. So we're going to try to continue that service. I will draw your attention to that note that the summer feeding program is set to expire August 31st. So after that date, everyone will be required to authenticate with their lunch account in order to receive a meal. And just one more other little asterisk that has been recently added. For this coming school year, all students who qualify for reduced lunch rate will be automatically shifted to free status. And that is a decision that was made at the state level in conjunction with federal guidelines. That's not a local decision. That was made at the state level. It is possible that the summer feeding program could be continued after August 31st, but we don't have any information about that at this time. Finally, transportation. We do plan on using our buses under Plan C. Although we won't be, transporting students to and from school, we will be delivering meals. We also are going to be delivering academic learning materials to our students who may not have access to reliable internet. And then we're going to be using our buses also as those mobile rangers, where we have the cell-based Wi-Fi's mounted on the roofs of the school buses. There is a note here that Dr. McLean referenced, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Dubison, but we would ask that the board take action in allowing the use of our buses for these purposes. So, Ms. Dubison?
Yes. Board members, so as Dr. Winborn has said, right now, so the way you have been doing meals in the spring and through the summer was through the summer feeding program, which is sort of allows you to more freely distribute meals and has a lot fewer rules than the school year feeding program. And that has not been extended as of now. So what we got from DPI is that what they are working and hoping that there will be some additional flexibility granted, and they recommended that there be board approval for the use of yellow buses in the event that we are granted that flexibility. So I think what the administration was hoping for was a motion to approve the use of yellow buses for child nutrition meal delivery during the 2021 school year, if permitted by state and federal authorities.
All right, board, you have heard the recommendation of the staff and the guidance from the attorney. Is there a motion that we would like to entertain?
Mr. Richardson, this is Danny Udy. I'll make that motion.
All right, so we have a motion that we use our yellow school buses as described by the staff there for reentry. Do we have a second for that?
Second, Peace.
All right, so we have a motion by Mr. Udy and a second by Mr. Peace. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, if you're ready to vote, Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan? Dr. Houlihan, are you still with us?
I just couldn't get my microphone open. Yes.
Okay. Yes. All right. And so that passes unanimously. All right. Thank you so much. Dr. McLean, do you have anything else on reentry?
Thank you. That concludes our reentry update this evening, Mr. Chair.
All right. Great.
Mr. Chair, I've got a couple of questions, if I could, on this.
Yes, sir.
the kids are going to have to wear masks, even the kindergarten kids. Do you know what a I was going to say joke, but I won't. Do you realize, can you imagine a kindergarten child keeping a mask on all day? Or even, anyway, we know that that's interesting. Dr. McLean, if you could just take a couple of minutes and share with us the motion we passed regarding giving you the authority to assess every 4 weeks on this, and then recommending something to the board if appropriate. Have you thought anything at all about how that might work?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, sir. Dr. Houlihan. Several things will come into play with that. There won't be any one, I hate to even use the word metric because people are looking for one number. I got challenged on, is there a metric? What we're looking for is good information, and good information is going to be both quantitative data and qualitative data. So it is going to be a combination of readiness data, meaning teachers will have already experienced all of the protocols, the procedures, the safety mechanisms, the screenings, in addition to teaching. So we're going to be doing some talking with, how do you feel? Are you ready? And talking with the health officials. That's a big piece of it as well. How are you feeling? Because now we're going to introduce new variables. That is an important component. That will be a piece. Duke University is doing research right now. I sent the board last night some research from UNC.
Yeah.
That will be a component. And they were looking at psychologist and social worker readiness and counseling readiness, things of that nature. And we're going to continue looking at those dynamics in addition to where our state is and how we look per 100 and how our local county looks. There's so many variables, Dr. Houlihan. There just won't be one fact.
Right.
Several pieces, sir.
The reason I bring that up is because I'm sure, as some of us have already been approached on this, I'm sure that people will be asking us, how are you going to make such a decision? How is the superintendent going to do that? And it would be really helpful if when somebody asks us that, a parent or whatever, that we have we come across as actually maybe knowing something as opposed to, you get my point.
Yes, sir. One of the things I'd like to do is when we get closer to that 4-week mark, share with you all, not just the articles, but here are some factors that are standing out in the research at that time. Here are some factors standing out internal to the district, external to the district, in our region, in our state. Just putting a compilation of pieces together and having, like I said earlier this evening, dialogue with the board, and what do you all think? And for us to be able to talk about some of those pieces, but there will be no 1 or 2 items. There will be several pieces.
Which makes sense. One last quick thing. As you go along, it would be, I think, extremely important that, would you just try to stand, or somebody keep up with how much this is costing us to do all of this out of pocket, and how are we going to pay for it? Because I know that to do all that you're talking about and cleaning and this, that, and the other, it's going to cost some money, and that's money that's not in our budget. So I think we all would like to know how that plays out.
Yes, sir. Dr. Winborn, would you want to address just a little bit? I know there's some components there you've already begun taking a look at, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question, Dr. Lulan, because This comes at a high cost. The cleaning supplies and a lot of the PPE, fortunately, can be paid for out of the CARES funds. There are specific line items in there that we can use for that. I was super happy to see that the state of North Carolina actually purchased and shipped to us directly the face masks for students. We received a package of 5 cloth face masks for every student and every faculty member, and we just received those at the warehouse last week. And that was a substantial cost avoidance right there, because it was, I believe it was nearly 40,000 face masks, cloth face masks. And those are running anywhere from $3 to $5 each, depending on which vendor you go with. But I mean, you're right. And there are a lot of hidden costs. One of the things that we've talked about specifically related to busing our students is that if we screen our students prior to getting on the bus, we need to have a monitor for each bus.
Right.
And, we run about 89 buses last year before the pandemic hit. We were running right at about 90 buses. And we ran some numbers on that. It's about 120 hours per run. So in the morning, our buses are running total across the district about 120 hours. And then in the afternoon, they run again for another 120 hours. So if we had on the bus in the morning, you take the wages of a monitor, which may run, I don't know, $15 to $16, $17 an hour, including benefits, times 120 hours per day, you start seeing how that adds up. I mean, that gets expensive very, very quickly. So, and that's just one example. But you're right.
Thank you all for that.
Okay. Any further questions before we move forward?
Yes, one more to elaborate on something Dr. Houlihan says, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Houlihan, I mean, Dr. McLean and Dr. Winburn, as part of the information that I would like to see disseminated is the science about the transmissibility. I mean, the evidence that I've shown is that there is just zero transmission from student to teacher. That's going to be enormous in helping to convince our teachers that it is safe to come back to work. So I think it's incumbent upon you all. I mean, I can do my own research, and so can each board member. But I think it's incumbent upon you all to look at the studies and look at the science that actually addresses the risks. It's my opinion that there is very minimal risk, and it's actually safer to be in our schools with all of our protocols than to be in a Walmart or even in a library, which is where we may be sending some of our children for Wi-Fi access. So if we are exposing our librarians to that risk, which doesn't seem fair, but there's probably not a risk because of the transmissibility from students to teachers. So that's the kind of data we're going to need, but more importantly, that's the kind of data I think our teachers are going to need to have them develop the confidence that it is safe to go to work. And I think that's critical if we try to get back face-to-face as soon as possible.
All right, thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
We will move on to 8.03. We have Mr. Calvin Timberlake, our Director of Athletics and Driver Education, giving us a driver education update.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chair, Dr. McLean, and all the board members. As you know, our driver's ed class was interrupted in March for a number of students all across the state. And we have a lot of parental and student interest in how we're going to complete that class. We can scroll up to the first slide, please. House Bill 158 actually addresses that. First, they address it through the Division of Motor Vehicles. If the child has actually completed the class, they're going to waive the road test. And for that limited provisional license, if they otherwise meet other requirements. If that requirement is waived before that student can get the level 3 full provisional license, they will have to go through the road test, and I'm thankful for that. This will be in place until the Division of Motor Vehicles resume. As you know, most of the DMV was closed across the state, so students couldn't actually go and complete. We go to the second slide. The second slide actually addresses the classroom portion. All of the students who actually completed 15 hours prior to us leaving, they're just deeming them completed. We had a number of students that didn't quite make that 15 hours. Since then, we were allowed to complete those hours virtually with some of our students, and some of them did so. They can also take the proficiency examination developed by DPI. Okay. But by no means can they actually waive the 6 hours behind the wheel, which leads us to our next slide. DPI has actually come up with guidelines to enable districts, if they choose to address those students who were in the driver's ed class in the spring to complete the behind the wheel portion. They must do the 6 hours, and they have given us strict guidelines that look very similar to what Dr. Winborn was sharing with us, with the temperature checks prior to getting in the car, wearing the mask, cleaning after each and every every student driver, and they have to do that. The social distancing while they're waiting for that. But that opportunity is available to the district if we choose to, and the guidelines are in place and have been reviewed by the executive team as well as our district attorney. That concludes House Bill 158.
All right, board members, what questions do you have for Mr. Timberlake?
I just had to, I wanted to pass on one thing from a parent and a coach.
Yes, sir.
Actually, as a grandparent, he indicated his letter to me was there's a huge basketball tournament in South Carolina with over 80 teams. It occurred the past 3 weeks. He sent me photographs of all the teams competing and all the like. And his comment basically was that not a single person in those 3 weeks, there's not been a single reported case of a COVID transmission. And he was advocating that we allow our athletes to proceed under Plan B, even though we're under Plan C. I just want to pass that along. I don't know whether that's something that we can do for our student athletes to allow some preparation for a season. I still personally have not done all the research on that medically that I would like to, but I just wanted to pass that on as it was.
Mr. Rivers, I'm a little confused. Is this dealing with the driver's education program or an additional piece?
No, this is dealing with Mr. Timberlake as the head of our athletic coordinator.
Okay, if you could pass that along to him outside the meeting, that'd be great.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I had him. I was just going to do it then. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Board members, any further questions about Mr. Timberlake's presentation? All right, thank you, Mr. Timberlake. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, now we're moving to 8.04, board member terms. Attorney Dubison, we asked attorney to come and bring a review of where we are with this piece of information. We did have this, was supposed to be scheduled for June, and I omitted it off the agenda by mistake. And so she is going to come. She has already sent you a memo regarding this. And so Attorney Dubison.
Yes, thank you. Board members, just to review, we originally approached this issue, or this issue was brought up, and let me just make sure. Dr. McLean, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, thank you. The board, initially there was an interest in reducing board member terms from 6 years to 4 years, which is the standard in North Carolina, with a few exceptions. And because you have this court order in place with regard to your school board elections from the 1980s, it's really a two-part process. There's a legal side and there's a political side, because you would need local legislation to change your terms, but we would also need to revise that court order. And so what I have brought to you after our last discussion, I had brought some, the question was, okay, if we're interested in revising our terms, how would we do it? How exactly would we implement that change? And I brought some options, and the board's request was that I go back and bring back an option that has the board divided 4 seats in one election and 3 in the other, as opposed to 5 and 2, but does not necessarily align with the county commissioners from that district with the dates that they're elected. And so that is what I have sent out. And the next steps, once the board has chosen a plan, is I will submit it to the Department of Justice, and then we have to seek court approval of that. And I think, as we've experienced, that is not a fast process. Both, obviously, originally there was a great deal of caused by the federal government shutdown. Then obviously now courts are perhaps not operating at full capacity due to the pandemic. But nevertheless, the initial answer I got from the Department of Justice was that they didn't necessarily have an objection, but they needed to see the official plan, because their interest in this, stemming out of this 1989 case, is to make sure that the board doesn't do anything to disadvantage minority voters in Granville County. And so they have to see the actual plan. And then my hope is that they will consent and that court approval would not be too difficult. But then separately, the board will need to pursue the political side, which is, working with a local legislator to get the legislation passed. So the draft options that I sent you, obviously one was a 4-3 split, and then I included the 5-2 just to remind you of what we had looked at before. And so if this is a plan that the board wants to adopt and wants to move forward with, then we could move forward with those next steps. I think I'll pause for questions there.
All right. Board members, what questions do you have regarding the memo and Attorney Dubison's presentation?
I had a quick question, Ms. Dubison. I had your memo on my email, and somehow I don't see it now, so I apologize. I did look at it earlier. Basically, my recollection is we voted in February of 2019 to move towards going to 4-year terms. So it seems to me that it's the board's wish, unless we rescind that motion that was approved, that we press on. I think there is support in the local legislative body, at least a year ago there was, to submit legislation on our behalf to get the terms reduced. So just to confirm, are you basically just asking us to approve your plan? Is that it? And then you will go forward with Justice? Has Justice, I know the last time you talked to us, Justice had not ruled. Do you have any more information on that?
So to go back in the timeline, looking back at the minutes, so in February 2019, the board voted to authorize me to seek amendment of the 1989 court order. And so it took me from February to August to get an answer from the DOJ, which was, we need to see the specific plan that the board, and specifically how they want to make this change. In October, the board debated some different plans, and then asked me to bring back something different. So what you asked for was a simpler version that would make the board a 4-3 split, but simpler, meaning not aligning with the county commissioners, which made it more complicated. And then my recollection is after that, that was when Mr. Mims resigned, and there was some interest in waiting until his seat was filled before making a final decision. So yes, your next step is to pick a plan. I don't have a personal interest in what your plan is, but this is the one that I came up with that fit the criteria that you had provided. So if this is the plan that you wish to pursue, then
I'm not hearing her. Is anyone else not hearing Ms. Dubison?
Are you still there, Ms. Dubison? Attorney Dubison? Okay. I believe we have lost her. So to recap, what I feel like she was saying was the plans that were presented to us there that is in that memo, we need to make a decision on how to pursue that. And then it seems as if we need to talk about a strategy to move into how we would deal with contacting our legislators. She says she's trying to sign in now, so let's give her a moment. Okay, while we're waiting for her, do we want to discuss these plans that she's made available to us? Do we want to come up with a plan of how to contact legislators? Are we where are we at with this board?
I would like to offer a motion that we, if that is what is required, that we make a decision on the plans that she has suggested so that she can offer that to Justice so that we can get a green light from them and then approach the legislators.
Okay, all right. What would that motion be, Mr. Rivers?
I move that we discuss and evaluate the plan submitted by Ms. Dubison and select the most appropriate one and allow her to proceed with reporting that to the Department of Justice to get their okay before we proceed with the legislators.
Okay. Are you wanting to recommend a particular plan, or you're just asking the board to review what she submitted?
And I'm sorry, I am back.
She's back. Okay.
Board member.
I was basically asking that she present the plans, that we vote on the one that we like the best, and that she move forward with Justice. Okay.
Attorney, did you want to finish what you were saying before you got cut off?
Sure. Well, I was finished. I was just explaining what the next steps are. So, board members, if you, I've heard Ms. Rivers say you want me to present the plan, and I want to make sure I understand what you mean. Like read it out.
Well, I think the board obviously would want to vote on it. So I think there should be some opportunity for discussion. Some board members may have different opinions or the like, but so I think it needs to come before the board so that we can select the plan that we like and make sure we're happy with it.
Yeah, okay. I agree. I thought it was before the board. I thought that's what we were doing.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of where maybe Mr. Rivers, probably we need to make the motion actually pick one, or are you wanting to debate which one from the board. I guess I'm kind of a little lost of how we want to do this.
I was just suggesting that
Mr. Richardson. Yeah, I was just trying to
go ahead.
Clarification. Are we looking at debating the 4-3 split or the 5-2 split? I guess that's where I'm trying to follow where what are we actually debating?
That would be my question is I feel like we probably need to get a motion on the floor of which one to choose, let us debate, and then go that direction.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have access to the plan. I had them in a memo, but I can't get to it right now. So I need to know what.
I'm happy to read it out. And I've also I have forwarded it to Dr. Winborn and to Mr. Myrick if one of them is able to pull it up and screen share.
I'll pull it up for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That would, and then attorney, if you could still read it out, because I know a few are joining by phone.
So yes, absolutely. So the 4-3 split would have districts 5 and 7. So right now, as it stands, districts 5 and 7 are the next to be up for re-election, which is in 2022. And then 3 and 4 are up in 2024, and 1, 2, and 6 are up in 2026. So the idea would be that 5 and 7 in the 2022 election do another 6-year term. And then in 2028, switch to 4 years. That districts 3 and 4 go ahead and switch to 4-year terms in 24. And then 1, 2, and 6 go to 4-year terms in 26. And so the reason that 5 and 7 would do one more 6-year term before going to 4 years had to do with right now because you have 6-year terms, your re-election are spread across 3 elections, and we need to change it so that they're spread across 2 elections. And so that's why it is staggered like that.
Thank you.
I would like to move that the board adopt option 1 and Ms. Dubison present that to the Department of Justice for their approval. And then we proceed on with getting our local legislative group to offer legislation to the effect in the with the state legislature.
Okay. Mr. Rivers has made, did you have a question, Ms. Howard?
Yeah, I was going to ask which was option 1.
Option 1 is the 4-3 split.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Mr. Rivers has made a motion to go with option 1, which is the 4-3 split. Do we have a second for that motion?
Mr. Udy.
All right, so we have a motion by Mr. Rivers and a second by Mr. Udy. Any further deliberation? Okay, if you're ready to vote, and so this will effectually choose option 1, the 4-3 split, for the attorney to present back to the Justice Department for their sign off for us to proceed with this. If you're ready to vote, Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. And so Attorney Dubison, if you could move forward with presenting that plan to the Department of Justice, and once you get a response back, if you'll present that back to us.
I will do so.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so now moving into 8.05, the delay of adoption of social studies standards. And so I'll turn it over to Dr. Myrick and Miss Angela Salisbury.
Good evening, Board Chair Richardson and board members. I will be sharing tonight with everyone, and Ms. Salisbury will be available for questions if we need her to chime in. So in February, we presented to the board the new social studies policy updates that were required for civics and personal finance course. However, this summer, last month, the State Board of Education voted to delay adopting the new social studies standards. And what they shared with us, they're delaying the adoption to refine the K-12 standards to ensure equity and multiple perspectives are represented. The delay will affect graduation requirements of incoming students this fall. However, our schools had already decided to offer world history to all incoming ninth graders. So we would not be affected immediately by the change. DPI has provided options for 9 through 12 to ensure that our teachers are not having to teach multiple social studies courses for all of the different students who would need them. And one example that I would like to just point out to you, for 2021 students, they can meet the American history requirement by successfully completing one of 3 courses, American 1, American 2, or the new American history course. That's just one example. And also the delay in the standards does not affect kindergarten through 8th grade. They will continue to use the current social studies standards. And the full memo is attached in board docs. Thank you.
All right, board members, do you have questions regarding this? All right, thank you so much. We look forward to hearing more about that later on. All right, and Dr. Myrick, you're up next to present 8.06 Alternative Accountability Model for Phoenix Academy.
Okay. And Mr. Timberlake is available if you should have any questions about this one as well. Each year, our alternative school our board has to choose a model for our alternative school. And the state has 3 models that we can choose from. Option A, alternative schools can participate in school performance grades. Option B, alternative schools can participate in alternative schools progress model. And the option B includes the following. Student persistence is worth 20%, school achievement is worth 20%, and growth is worth 60% in option B. And then finally in option C, the alternative school may propose its own accountability model for approval by the state board. However, they do give 2 pieces of guidance. The proposed model must include criteria for achievement and growth, and they may elect to use their own data to assign themselves, but they cannot mirror designations already using the accountability model. And a request for option C must be submitted annually to the state board for approval. Tonight, we are asking that our board approve option B, alternative schools progress model. And just as a reminder, this is the same model that we used last year. And under plan and under option B, there's 3 years worth of data is collected when calculating school achievement. So Mr. Chair, this is an action item.
All right, thank you, Dr. Myrick. Board members, what questions do you have before we move for a recommendation?
I have a question for Mr. Timberlake.
Yes, sir.
I'm concerned about the achievement being only 20% of the grade, and it may be that's the best way to do it. I don't know. I'm asking a question. Can you defend or explain to me why you support that? Why 20-20-60 as opposed to 80-20 that we do in our traditional schools? Why that's a better road to go down?
Sure. Alternative schools originally was set up for really to prevent student dropout. That was one of the main reasons the alternative schools were set up for, to prevent dropout. So to have that breakdown, and most of the time, if we're looking at students that are facing dropout, they're usually already struggling academically. So I think it's great that they look at the growth that they make. Also, student persistent falls right in line with one of the main purposes of an alternative setting, and that is keeping that child in school. And so student persistent measures that child stayed in school and failed to drop out and be on our streets. So I think that breakdown is very good. It looks at growth. Really, I think most schools, if they really take growth more into consideration over proficiency, it would give a truer assessment of the progress that we are making. And so I think it's a great model.
If a student, and we know that Phoenix Academy has oftentimes temporary students, I guess students that are assigned there for a certain period of time, maybe a few weeks or maybe a semester or whatever. When those students, and I've been to Phoenix Academy, I really appreciate the fine work you're doing there. I'm sincerely mean that. When some of those students, actually you've reached them, you've gotten to them, you've gotten them to engage, and they're ready to go back to their base school, say Webb, for instance. How does this change? So let's say maybe the fall semester, or they were assigned to Phoenix Academy early in the fall semester, and then by the end of the fall semester, you were confident they're ready to go back to their base school. How does this 20/20/60 transfer to 80/20?
Well, like all the accountability models, we get a percentage based upon the number of days they're in attendance at that school, and that's with any school. Should a student transfer across the state, each teacher gets a percentage of that depending on the number of days they were in attendance at that school. But to answer that question, we have several categories of students at Phoenix. Some of them are assigned there through the disciplinary actions. We have students that volunteer because they like the alternative method that we use, mainly personalized instruction. Then others that are coming out of our maybe dealing with mental health issues, or they're coming out of law enforcement. They have to transition through Phoenix. And when we look at the progress they made, particularly social emotionally, and changing and managing their behavior, because that's the key thing we address there. That's usually the barrier that most students have. That's why they can't be one successful in a regular setting. So we have always addressed the socio-emotional piece of this. I know that other schools are coming on board now because of COVID, but I found that to be the key ingredient to helping kids help themselves. They need to learn to manage their own emotions, manage their own behaviors. And so we did that through community partners, and now through a project called Project Arrow. And that has really been the real key, not just changing facilities or changing buildings, but if you don't address the barrier that they're facing, then we're not going to be successful. And we have been successful doing that.
I guess I didn't phrase my question very well. Is there going to be any problem when a student goes back to their home school, which is going to be an 80/20 for the school report cards? Is there any problem? Can we just seamlessly transition when they've been evaluated on a 60/20/20 and they go to an 80/20? Is there any difficulty you perceive going back to their school, their home school?
No, sir, because
we'd love them to go back to their home school, after you work with them.
No, that model is for the school itself, not for the child. The child will always be evaluated based upon his growth and proficiency, but this model is for the school itself.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to also add, everyone, these are state models. These are not local Granville County Schools developed models. These are from the state. These are options that were presented to us.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept option B.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll
I
second it.
second.
All right. So we have a motion by Mr. Udy, a second by Mr. Rivers, that we approve the option B for alternative schools progress model. Are there further discussion? All right. Hearing none, if you're ready to vote, Ms. Allred. Ms. Allred, I think you're muted.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Rivers,
Yes.
Dr. McKnight,
Yes.
Mr. Peace,
Yes.
Mr. Udy,
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan, Dr. Houlihan. It appears that he's knocked off, and so if we can notate that he wasn't here for that vote, and so that motion passes unanimously with 6-0. All right. Next item, Dr. Myrick, you'll be presenting the Granville Early College High School cohort graduation rate legislative change. That's a mouthful.
Yes, sir. Okay, beginning with the incoming ninth graders, the 2021 school year, students enrolled in a comprehensive, innovative high school that is, for us, Granville Early College. And offer a fifth year, those students are required to have completed 22 high school credits by the end of their fourth year. This has been done at all of the schools across the state. We have been looking at and making sure that our students are counted in the four-year graduation cohort rate. So this change will not affect us that much. However, students will be able to continue their fifth year in the school district, as well as receive any courses up to the number of courses that we have in our district. In our district, of course, our students can receive up to 32 credits to graduate. So the students will be allowed to continue their fifth year and complete any high school credits that we have in our district, as well as finish any degree that they might be working on at the community college. And this goes into effect again with this year's incoming ninth graders. Any questions about this one? I know I went pretty quickly on it.
Okay. No action item on this, Dr. Myrick?
No, sir. This is information. This is a requirement by the State Board of Education.
Okay.
It was a policy change.
All right. All right, board members, any other questions regarding that? All right, thank you, sir. All right, now we will move into our finance portion of the night. First up, we have information about the sale of Joe Toller Oak Hill. I believe Attorney Dubison will present on this.
Yes, board members, as you know, we received a bid on Joe Toller in June and have been conducting the upset bid process. And after a couple of rounds, we do have a final bid that has not been upset, and the final bid is for $264,100. And so Dr. Winborn is sharing right now a resolution to approve the sale to that bidder. The bidder has deposited 5% of the bid with the finance officer. And we told them, and then that's where it has stood, because we needed to bring it back to the board for final approval of the sale. So if you approve this sale, what the resolution says is that you approve the sale of the property to that bidder, subject to execution of an agreement containing terms that are acceptable to all parties as negotiated by the superintendent and the board chair. And then that you authorize the superintendent and board chair to execute all documents necessary to transfer title to the property. And the property was advertised and is being sold as is.
Okay. And attorney, am I correct that the profit made from this goes into our capital outlay?
That's correct. It would go into your capital outlay fund.
Okay. Dr. McLean, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, sir, not at this time. This is our third property for the year.
Okay. All right, board members, you have the action there in front of you, the resolution. What would be the motion of the board?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
We know the property was originally appraised for $400,000 plus. I guess I'd like to get Dr. Winburn, Dr. McLean, maybe Ms. Day, whoever, and Attorney Dubison, before the board makes this decision, I would just like to know, this seems like we're not getting enough money. If we rejected this, is there any feeling from the realtor or anything that this bidder would end up bidding more money? I mean, this seems like a bargain to me, and I'm just curious. I'm happy to vote for this if you all think this is the best we can possibly do, but I just feel like we're not getting our money's worth.
Okay, Dr. McLean, Dr. Winborn, would one of you like to speak to that?
Dr. Winborn, would you like to go first?
Yes, ma'am. Be happy to. So, Mr. Rivers, I do understand what you're saying. I think this is definitely less than the appraised value. I will note that there were two bidders that were going back and forth about this that drove it into a third round. After the second round, the other bidder withdrew, and based on my conversations with our realtor, I feel like that this we're pretty lucky considering the time we're in, the way what's happening with COVID, the markets, the unique aspects of this property. I believe that this is it's a good offer. It's a reasonable offer. And I think that it's an opportunity for the board not only to recoup the $264,000, but to stop spending the more than $100,000 a year and just keeping it up. And God forbid something would really go wrong with the property, we would have to sink a lot more money into it. If a roof failed or HVAC went out, so on and so forth. I think that it would be a wise decision for the board to go ahead and liquidate this real property.
I will.
And I'll add that the board certainly can reject or decline the offer, but the way the sale of public property happens, if you were to say then re-advertise it and say we won't accept less than X. Anytime you get an offer, you then go through this bidding process again. So the bidding process is sort of supposed to give you a sense of the market, or really to capture very transparently what the market will bear. So I don't know, if you were to go back to this buyer, you would then have, go through the bidding process again. So all of that is to say you don't have to sell to this buyer, but your other option would be to go through another public, either an auction or the upset bid process. And I will note with regard to the appraisal, my recollection is the appraiser did acknowledge this was a pretty difficult property to appraise. There aren't really any comparables. So that was, he made the appraisal based on, I think, comparable commercial properties, but while acknowledging that it was difficult to put a number on the value of this property.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And Mr. Rivers, I think for me, I'll add some of the conversations I've been in, I think individuals have been surprised we got this much, and then to watch it, well, I think they were surprised at the first number we got, Dr. Winborn, if I recall correctly, and then to watch it go up even more and to get to this place has been interesting. I think more importantly, though, is the second part of what Dr. Winborn said, and that was to be able to come from under having to deal with the cost of upkeep over time, which is what I thought was important to the board. I think that's what I thought I heard when we began to talk about this property. So I just wanted to be sure to say something about that.
No, I appreciate that. I think it just gives me more a better feeling if I know that you all are all in agreement that this is the best way to go.
Board, again, what is your desire to motion for this resolution?
Mr. Chairman, this is Danny Udy. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the bid of $264,100 for the sale of Joe Toller Oak.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion?
McKnight, second.
Okay. So we have a motion by Mr. Udy, a second by Dr. McKnight, that we accept the resolution as presented and proceed with the sale of Joe Toller Oak Hill Elementary School. Is there any further deliberation? All right. Seeing none, if you're ready to vote, Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, the motion passes unanimously 7-0. And so attorney and Dr. Winborn, Dr. McLean, if you'll move forward with the sale of that property.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much for the work done on that. All right, next up is 9.02, the potential lease of property for a cell phone tower. I believe this is going to be Dr. Winborn, am I correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. Just also joining our meeting is a guest tonight. His name is Marshall Melvin, and he is from the organization PM&A. It is an engineering development company that represents cell phone companies. I have been communicating with Mr. Melvin since January when he first reached out about the possibility of placing a cell phone tower on the wooded part of our Mount Energy Elementary School campus. COVID-19 hit and we kind of put it on the back burner, and then we brought this to the operations committee in June. And the operations committee listened to a presentation from Mr. Melvin and asked me to proceed with the next steps. Mr. Melvin then came out and did a site visit. He drove up from Georgia and checked out the property, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. And so now we are bringing the information to the full board. It's basically a very rough proposal about what the placement and lease of property on the Mount Energy property might look like. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marshall. I believe you're on the line. Is that, can you hear us?
Everyone. I'm sorry, Stan. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. As Stan said, my name is Marshall Melvin. I'm the company I work for, PM&A, is contracted by Verizon to look for their sites and develop them and get them to a point. And actually, we do have a construction management piece that also manages the construction part, but this is the very beginning of it. And Stan, would you like to go through the memo that I sent you?
Yes, sir. Let me share my screen.
I think that would be the most concise way to do it. I know you
Absolutely.
guys have been on for a long time.
All right, it is up. So the first page is your letter.
Okay, the first page, this is a 5-page memo. In essence, I don't know if any of you have read it, but it basically just briefly lays out what led us to this point. Verizon gives us what's called a search ring, which is really coordinates on a map, and maybe go out in half a mile radius, and then we look in that area for sites, look at the zoning, and there's a lot of tiers that have to be looked at from an environmental standpoint and whatnot. And this actual search ring was about the edge of that ring, if you can visualize that, was about a quarter-mile southeast of Mount Energy Elementary. So initially, when we're in that area looking, we did not approach the school at that time because it was not in our search area. But as we approached an individual, actually probably talked to several individuals in that area, and we entered into a lease agreement. And part of the approval process on the federal, and there's federal, state, and local levels of approvals, but obviously the main local level is the zoning and the building permit piece. And we started that with a pre-app meeting with the zoning people, and they informed us that we needed to approach the school, even though it was not in that initial search area. It was close enough, and the county code states that county property is preferred over private property. So that's what led me to call Stan and see if there was interest in the school. And we entered into a lease agreement with someone, but to try to get that approved. But if we want to move forward, we'll obviously we'll have to get out of that agreement and start over at the new location. And as Stan said, as if you could scroll down to the second page, Stan, I'm trying to be as concise with what I'm saying as possible. The basic dimensions of what we're looking at: 100 feet by 100 feet lease area. The term is a 5-year initial term with 4 additional 5-year extensions. Basically, in total, a 25-year lease. The tower type is a monopole, so there's no guide wires involved. It's 109 in height. There's monthly rent. This is actually a little higher than the monthly rent that we have with the property owner right now. But and every 5-year term, it goes up 10%. And so this kind of gives you what a layout at $800 a month during the initial term would be. So that's a little quick snapshot of the money and of the term and the lease area. As we go down on my site visit, basically one of the main things with zoning is for every foot of the tower, you have to be that away from all property lines. So in essence, if we have a 195-foot tower, if you count a lightning rod with that, it's about 199 feet. So it's 200 feet is what you need to be off the property line. So at the northwest corner, there's already an existing access right there in that dashed line that's coming down, and it leads to it. There's an existing water a pump station that's pointed out as well. So we would just come down that existing road, improve it, and go into that area, which is a couple of 100 feet off of each property line. And so that's kind of giving you an idea of where it would be in relation to the school. The idea would be it to be in one corner of another in case there was future development in the school. You try to limit the amount of area you're taking up. If you come down any further than that, the terrain gets real rough down in the southwest corner of that property. and there's a big slope down. It's really rough in that area, so it would be very difficult from a construction standpoint. And the access road would be very long as well. So I just felt that being in the northwest corner, it helps us for construction costs with lengths of run and that kind of thing. And it was least intrusive to future development, in my opinion. So if you go down one more, Stan, it gives a little more detailed look at that northwest corner. Excuse me. The pump station is hard to make out on this aerial, but it is a fenced area where there is water. Jack Blackwell, who works for the school system, and he met me out there, and he and I both thought that those green lines, which are underground, represent the sewer and water line coming from the school down southwest to the pump station, and it's probably pumped up to the street from there and carried out. So we would obviously locate those lines and make sure we're not damaging anything in there. So, and the site location would fit in that area nicely as far as the setbacks go. So that's a more detailed look at a site sketch. And then the last slide on this is just an example of a monopole tower. It's I think that particular one in my files is about 180 feet, maybe 160, so this one we're talking about maybe 20 or 30 feet taller, but that is what it would look like. So that is a quick snapshot of what we're talking about here. And I'm happy to go through any questions you may have or any roadblocks or pros and cons that you may have.
All right. Any questions, board?
Mr. Marshall, I got a quick one. Rob Rivers, I was on the ops committee and met with you virtually in June.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. It's probably undoable, but just thinking about future expansion of that school and to try and leave all of our options open. On the southeast corner, south of the bottom parking lot of that school, is that a possible location, and is it typical or is it allowable to allow your access to be through a school parking lot or something like that? In other words, that would be an area that would be, to me, least likely for us to expand. It could be. I was just curious, is that feasible, or is that just out of the question?
Well, it's not out of the question, I guess, but for us, it's more advantageous to not have to go through school property because, the school parking lot, because, then there's sometimes they need 24/7 access, and if an emergency happens, and there would be a locked gate at the street, but weaving through the school property with contractors and whatnot, it kind of muddies the water as far as you would need to check in at front office and that kind of thing if you entered through the parking lot with kids in the playground and that kind of thing. It just kind of, we would like to keep it as clean and away from the school as much as possible, the access and the site location. I'm not saying that you can't do that, but it becomes very murky as far as notifications and that kind of thing.
I understand, and I appreciate that. Dr. Winburn, if regarding, and I'm in favor of this, don't get me wrong, I'm just trying to keep all of our bases covered. If we ever did need to expand that school, have you looked at in which direction the expansion would go? Obviously, with the pump station there, it tends to make me believe we would not necessarily go in that direction. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts about that you want to share with the board?
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to. Actually, if you recall, in conjunction with another engineer, we looked at Mount Energy as a possible site for a conversion to a middle school. And we were looking at the sort of the lay of the land. And Melvin's exactly right. If you can see my cursor, the southwest, really the whole southern part of this plat is it's not good. It slopes off dramatically behind the school, and I think there are some drainage and wetland type issues down in here in the southwest corner. This field actually is about 40 feet lower than the playground. So this tiers down or steps down behind. So the elevation of the property in the southern part is probably, significantly more than it is out at the road frontage. So, I think the best, if you were going to have to add on to this school, you probably want to just push off some of these wings that already exist.
All right. So from your perspective, this would not be an encumbrance to us in the future.
No, sir.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Other questions, board members? I know personally, I've had several conversations with people in this area and just living not too far from this area before, that this area could definitely use a cell tower. And definitely, we're always looking for innovative ways for extra income. So at this point, barring any other information we've not heard that we will as we investigate, I would be in favor of it. That's just my opinion.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, board members, you don't have to make a final decision tonight. There are a number of steps so I think that, and Stan, you can correct me, I think what the administration is looking for is interest and direction. But if you were to move forward, we would negotiate, a full set of lease documents, which is somewhat complicated. And then those would come back to you for approval. They also have to be publicly advertised before you approve them for a certain period of time. I think it's 10 days because of the length of the lease. So there are a few steps involved.
Attorney, would there need to be, and maybe this isn't on our watch, but is there needing to be a public hearing related to this? Or is that more of a county commissioner thing?
Right. If there's some zoning involved, then perhaps that's a little outside of what I would know, but the board is authorized to lease property for cell towers up to 25 years, but you do have to, advertise to the public that you intend to do so. And, we would negotiate the lease documents.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I might also just add something that we shared at the Operations Committee meeting. While we don't have cell towers on any of our other properties, it is important to note that Wilton Elementary School actually has one adjacent. So although it's not on our property, we certainly do have a precedent. Right here is the cell phone tower, and then here is Wilton Elementary School. So, excuse me, this is the cell phone tower. This is the water tower. So it is literally right beside the school. Just as an FYI.
Yes, sir. And we do have is it a cell extender here on the central office property?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Rivers, I'm sorry, I think I cut you off.
No, that's okay. I was just going to, after the ops meeting, I drove down there to look at that. Dr. Winborn's absolutely right. The Wilton cell tower is much closer to Wilton than this will be to Mount Energy, and much more obtrusive. And it really wasn't, it was not an issue to me. It looked, and it's not been an issue to the Wilton school as far as I can tell. So it's a good point, Dr. Winborn. I think the precedent is there. I think it's a good way to make some extra money, and I think it will not cause any problems with the school.
Okay. Board, this is being brought to you as information, but we are looking for either direction or consensus of direction for the administration. So is anybody willing to make a motion in that direction?
As a member of the Ops Committee, I move that we accept this memorandum that we proceed onward with all the steps necessary to determine whether or not we can effect this lease.
Okay. All right. Do we have a second for that?
Mr. Hughes, second.
I think I heard Mr. Udy first. So Mr. Rivers and Mr. Udy have made motions that we accept the memo of understanding and ask the administration to proceed with executing the steps to bring back to us a lease for a cell tower on the property of Mount Energy Elementary School. So any further deliberation? All right, seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, that action passes unanimously 7-0. And so Dr. Winborn, if you'll work on that, and Mr. Melvin, we appreciate you joining us and also your time with the Operations Committee. And we look forward to possibly working with you in the future.
Sure. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Melvin.
All right, board, we'll be moving on to 9.03, our school capacity report. Dr. Winborn, if you will present.
Sorry, I'm muted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight's information is actually a delayed response to a request that was made prior to the pandemic. This is sort of a bit of unfinished business. In the past, I have presented capacity report information to the board. And in some of our discussions about school reorganization, the issue was brought up about maybe taking a second look at capacity numbers and thinking about them not just in terms of absolute capacity. In other words, what's the most number of students that we can absolutely fit into a school building versus what is the optimal capacity and or the ideal capacity, keeping the academic focus front and center. So I have here on board docs 2 documents. The first is just a little narrative about capacity and about really, the point I'm trying to make with this is that this is somewhat open to interpretation. The numbers that I had previously provided the board were based on worksheets that North Carolina Department of Public Instruction provides, and they're very straightforward. And I just gave an example, and you plug in the number of classrooms, and it spits out the number of students that you can fit. But what is often not taken into account are the fact that many of our actual classrooms, spaces in our schools that are called classrooms, are used for something other than a regular classroom for children. And I give some examples in the bullets here. Sometimes these are elective classrooms. They are maker spaces. They are places that we pull students out and give specialized instruction. They're sometimes used as data rooms or a conference room where people can meet with families. Sometimes they're used as offices or ISS, and on and on and on. And so, you can see how these other competing needs in our schools can gobble up space and impact the absolute capacity numbers. Also, just trying to make the point that some of our classrooms are specifically designed for specific purposes. So that makes it even a little bit more complicated. So when I ran the numbers, the second document is basically just some charts. And when I ran the numbers, I sat down and I met with each principal at each school, and we looked at the layout of their building, and we talked about this. I showed them what the absolute capacity meant, and then they brought it back to reality and talked about what was really ideal during the course of school. And we also talked about things like, well, what the cafeteria could handle. what the hallways were capable of handling, and so on and so forth. So the bottom line is the optimal capacity resulted in about anywhere from 7 to 12% increase in the efficiency rating for the school, or I guess you could say a reduction in the efficiency rating of the building. This chart shows the optimal capacity running at about 69% currently for our district. I've also listed the number of current surplus classrooms for each school, so you can see that. Also included the square footage, in case you're interested in that. In this first column, of course, you could compare it to the absolute maximum capacity. And then I've broken it down by school and then by grade level. So I thought you might be interested in seeing, how does this really break down when you look at it grade level by grade level, classroom by classroom, and you can get a clearer picture of what we can really fit in our buildings while allowing for extra space for our other programs. Here's the middle school data, and here's the high school data as well. And then, of course, I just attached the reports that I had previously shared with the board here. This is from 1819. And then this is some data that I inherited when I came into this role, and I started doing some additional analysis on it here. So I bring all of this today for you just as additional information to consider when looking at school reorganization. I think regardless of which number you're looking at, maximum capacity versus optimal capacity, there is no denying that we still have surplus space in our school buildings. So I'll end it with that and answer any questions you may have.
All right, board members, what questions do you have? Do keep in mind this will be an item that we discuss probably in our work during the retreat in August. But do you have questions for Dr. Winborn tonight?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank him for providing us with this information. It's very valuable. Clearly, looking at these numbers, especially on your capacity data on your second handout, just looking at it, we can see we have 1,300 unused elementary school desks. We have 700 middle school and 1,200 high school. Clearly, I think we're going to, with our financial situation, we're going to have to consider, closing schools. And I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not, but certainly this would, I think, argue that we definitely need to consider that very seriously in August.
All right. Other comments? All right. Thank you, Dr. Winborn. I appreciate you bringing us back with that extra information. Good work there. All right, board. Now we'll be moving to 9.04 budget amendments. Ms. Day, if you have some budget amendments to bring us from the last fiscal year.
Yes, Mr. Richardson, board members, I am as you mentioned, these are budget amendments from the last fiscal year, 1920 fiscal year, and they are for information. You might recall that at the June 1st board meeting, you approved a resolution which will allow the superintendent to approve budget amendments that were necessary at the very end of the fiscal year. And then according to that resolution, these amendments would be brought to you as information at the next regular board meeting. So that is what I'm bringing to you tonight. In board docs, you have a budget amendment for the state fund, and it's within the state fund, no increase or decrease to that fund's budget, but the largest transfer within that budget is for the interfunds transfers related to the child nutrition fund and the changes that we learned of right at the end of the fiscal year about how we could use those funds and the guidance that we received at the very end of the fiscal year. The second budget amendment is for the federal grants funds. And again, this is just within the budget and based on coding within those programs. The third budget amendment is for the other restricted fund. We did receive funds for the Medicaid fiscal year 19 cost settlement of $130,215. We received those funds actually on June 30th. So this is budgeting for those funds. Those funds will carry over within this fund for use for the EC department in this current fiscal year. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Board members, do you have questions regarding these budget amendments? All right. So as Ms. Day stated, there is no action needed on these. You gave the superintendent permission to execute these. And so Ms. Day, thank you so much for that. You are also up for 9.05, our financial update and board travel as of 6:30.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Richardson and board members. You have both the financial update as of June 30th. This is through the end of our fiscal year. Our expenditures are within budget, and you can review how we ended that fiscal year with the different funds. So we're 100% through the fiscal year at this point. The other item attached is the board travel as of June 30th. The only difference between this report and the last report you received was we did receive a refund for Mr. Richardson's, the League of Women Voters, that was not able to be had because of the COVID-19. We did receive that refund. So as of June 30th, the amount of expenditures are $4,758.15. I am aware of one payment that for a training that was in June that was not made until this fiscal year of $472 that would be an adjustment, be an accrual for the a payment that's made in this year, but for the prior fiscal year. But on this report, you can see the remaining balance for the board travel, $5,865.85. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Ms. Day, I have one. So is in the realm of possibilities that the General Assembly actually goes back, will they ever approve a budget for 1920, or is that just kind of, it is what it is at this point, and now we've gone on to wait for 2021?
Mr. Richardson, I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. I have not heard, I know that the state has experience now in handling a year without a budget and has done things a little bit more speedier this year than they did last year without a budget, but I don't know that, I really don't know the answer to that, whether we will get a budget or not.
Okay. Just curious how that continuously happens and how everybody else has to deal with it.
All right.
Okay. All right. Board members, any other questions for Ms. Day related to that? All right. Well, we are now at the point where we will take a 10-minute break going into closed session. And so I'd like to entertain a motion that we adjourn to closed session in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 143, 318.11, A6, A3, and A5, and Section 115C, 321 for personnel and attorney-client privilege. Do I have someone willing to make that motion?
Danny Udy motion.
All right, do we have a second? Do we have a second for that?
McKnight, second.
Thank you, Dr. McKnight. I'm assuming there's no further deliberation, and so we'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Allred? It's Allred, I believe.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace? Mr. Peace, are you still there? Okay, we may have lost Mr. Peace. Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, so that motion passes unanimously. We will take do we need can we go a 5 and make it 8? So
Yeah.
all right, so we will come back about 8:50.
Make it 2.
All right. We are now back in open session. Board members, you have been presented with personnel items during closed session. And now I would take a motion to approve certified personnel as presented.
So moved.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second, McKnight.
All right. So I have a motion by Dr. Houlihan and a second by Dr. McKnight to approve certified personnel as presented. Is there any further deliberation? All right, seeing none, we'll take a vote. Ms. Allred?
Mr. Richardson, I'm going to have to abstain because I missed most of that because I lost my connection.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
All right, has Mr. Peace rejoined us? Okay, he's not there. Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
That motion carries 6-0. Next, if I could have a motion to approve classified personnel.
So moved.
All right, a second.
Second, McKnight.
All right, we have a motion by Dr. Houlihan and a second by Dr. McKnight. Is there any further deliberation? All right, if you're ready to vote, we'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Allred?
Abstain.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace? All right, Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
The motion carries 6-0. All right, is there any other business before the board tonight?
I have a quick point of clarification. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear Mr. Peace vote, so wouldn't those be 5-0? Not that I mean, just to be technically correct, wouldn't
No,
those?
it's 6-0. I'm sorry, you are right. You are correct. 5-0 with one abstaining at both of those. I'm sorry. Ms. Henderson, if you can make sure that you make that correction.
I have it.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rivers.
No problem.
All right, do we have anything further?
Mr. Richardson, can I
Yes,
make a
ma'am.
comment, please?
You can.
Thank you. My electricity's been going in and out, so I apologize that I have not been as active in this meeting as I wanted to be. I just wanted to thank Mr. Rivers for his passion in trying to get the schools back open. My main concern this whole time has been that we tried to give the parents a choice, and in my opinion, we kind of took that choice away and made the decision anyway. So that's been my concern the whole time, and I just wanted to thank Mr. Rivers for standing up for his convictions and for being so strong about it. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Allred. I appreciate that. All right, Dr. McLean, do you have anything further?
No, sir. I would just like to add, Ms. Henderson sent me a text right before the meeting that we may have to change our location of the master board training. And so I will be in touch with the board concerning that location as soon as I know a little something more.
Okay. All right, board members, there on your board docs, you will notice the dates for August there. The events going on at related to opening school, as well as the items that concern the board. Do pay attention there. We do have summer graduation at central office on August 10th. If you are available to be there for that, if you will let Dr. Myrick know. We have been invited as a board to the Granville County Law Enforcement Center opening, and that is 2 to 4 on August 10th. We will have virtual convocation, and your role this year, if you are available to participate in that, you'll get information on that. That'll be virtual, so you'll be able to watch that live streaming. And then we have dates for our board retreat as well as master board training, and the superintendent will be in touch with locations for those. If there is nothing else this evening, I'd like to entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion by Dr. Houlihan, a second by Mr. Udy. Is there any further questions about that? All right, hearing none, we'll vote. Ms. Alwyn?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace? Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, that motion carries 6-0. Please do be safe overnight. I've been kind of watching the weather as we've gone along, and it does look like it's gotten a little worse. And so we do ask that you be safe out there. And again, thank you for your attendance tonight. Staff, thank you for your presentations.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.